I've had a chat a couple of times with the others at Karkinos, and my understanding is that you're trying to create a digital and tech-enabled platform. You have your 4D model that shall enable superior cancer care, and in a way, your mission is to democratize cancer care. Now, could you help us understand this plainly? Who is the most typical patient that you want to benefit or you want to target? And for that kind of a patient, basis the system that you have woven together, how would that patient, let's say, first encounter the kind of solution that you have put together, and what would that patient's journey be through the solution that you're enabling?
Perfect. Who's the patient we're trying to target? The patient we're trying to target is unfortunately a potential cancer patient. So this does not span across any specific economic category. Anybody who needs cancer, if I may use the word, even guidance, not even treatment, guidance. The encounter with cancer itself is deeply scary. It definitely shakes people, it shakes families, and thereby the ability to bring this ecosystem together with the right purpose by explaining what to do, when to do, how to do, and why to do. So bringing them all together in a meaningful manner so that they understand the options, they understand the treatment regime, obviously the costs associated to it, the methods of the treatment, and thereby to simplify this entire treatment. So the science behind our organization is to start looking at leveraging precision medicine, is to look at molecular biology and genetics so that you're able to precisely attack the point of problem and thereby find easier, simpler, innovative, or traditional methods but solving the problem. There is a treatment, it has to be provided at point of care at precision. This treatment needs to be now catered to in terms of an aggregation of service. And that's what it is in terms of carrying that patient, their family members, through a method of learning to the providers and end-to-end owning clinical outcomes. So this is not about just aggregating services, but this is also about getting into clinical outcomes at the highest level of clinical quality, at the highest level of patient safety that is there to provide. And then through this entire aspect, there is so much of information that is captured. How do you discover more ways in which we can drive and thrive operational excellence leading to clinical excellence? So all of this put together is the 4D model of detection, diagnosis, delivery, and discovery. Cancer is something that we'll have to look at in 360 degrees across the 4-dimensional plane. Unfortunately, 3-dimensional is too small for cancer. So that's really what we're trying to do.
Panacea, who has been, in the business of providing radiotherapy, has developed the first Indian-made, Indian-designed LINAC machine, which is now getting rolled out in hospitals. And GVS, this I think speaks to a fundamental issue that so many of us around are talking about, which is that while there is a lot of positivity around India, the sense that we have is that India is punching far below its weight when it comes to producing and designing medical devices. And I think we have a fair amount of counterbalance in terms of what kind of devices we import, and even simple devices that we import. And in contrast to that, you have been able to develop one of the most sophisticated medical devices in India. So could you throw some light on how has your development and manufacturing journey been? How have you been able to do this when so many around us have not been able to do this? And what's your feeling of the value chain? Where do you sit within the value chain? What has been your experience as a manufacturer of a highly sophisticated medical device?
So, my name is GVS. I represent Panacea Medical Technologies. We are a Indian company. We have actually developed some real good medical device technologies all within the country. So the first reason why we have done this is because there was only a necessity. Necessity has driven us to where we have come. We started this radiotherapy devices way back in 2002, pre-Google or pre-internet era. So there, access to a data sheet of a device and all of that was something around 45 days for you to drop a mail card and then get something by post. So at that point of time, we have actually developed a cobalt therapy machine, and it has actually gone through the regulatory approvals in India. At that point of time, the regulatory approvals was something which was not very well known or very well defined, because there was no precedence. In most of the cases, there was no precedence, and it took us quite some time at that point of time to actually reach to get a clinical approval for patients to be treated on our machine. So we actually, I couldn't even call it wasted. We wasted about 1.5 years by running from pillar to post on how we will actually get approval, because the regulators themselves were new to this process. So that is how we started. But when we started the LINAC, it was far more easier for us, and we knew exactly what was required. We have designed the entire medical LINAC in-house. There was nothing that we had a collaboration from anyone outside. The software, the controls, the microwave devices, all of them are designed and made in our own facility. The reason why we had to go to this is because everyone will naturally expect an Indian machine to cost maybe 20% of an imported machine. This is a general view that people will have. Whenever you go to a customer will expect that you have to give it free. Somebody also mentioned the previous thing that software should be free. And people don't know the kind of software, the cycle through which the software has to go to qualify itself as a medical device. So those are all the facts that we had gone through. But the very interesting and very satisfying thing is there were several research labs in India which had helped us in a way to reach to where we have reached. They have been able to extend help in terms of making our understanding better, or validating some of the items that we have done in the path. The whole development cycle from the inception, the basic plan to where we have got regulatory approval took us quite some time. It took us around 7.5 years to reach to that place. But in the path, we had several things to prove to ourselves, prove to the external world outside Panacea, that yes, this is a medical LINAC which will work in actually being able to deliver. As we went through the process, one interesting thing is we've been able to make a very precise LINAC, and we have some patented features which will simplify the workflow so much that it is possible for these machines to be run by people who are not very well trained, and they can work in tier 2, tier 3 cities, not only in India, in several developing countries. So that is the purpose for which we've been working, and our goal was increasing accessibility to radiation therapy and increasing the affordability to this one. So on the affordability is where we have faced a lot of issues. If we were becoming an assembler where we have to buy, many of you already know that there is no ecosystem in India for component level sourcing for any medical device. Even if it's a small device, the ecosystem is so immature that you can't expect something to be delivered from within the country. So you have to either import all of these components and become an assembler, or when you do that, then you will be actually not viable, because everyone will expect you to be far lower by whatever grade, each person has their own way of measuring it. They will think that you have to be 20% of the imported cost. Somebody will at least be fair enough to say, okay, you should be 50% or like that. So to be viable was another fact that we had to go through. So to make it viable, we had to ground up, make the product design as well as the process design, and make all the components in-house. So except for some X-ray tubes and X-ray panels which are there in this machine, and semiconductor devices, nothing is nothing is bought from outside. So we don't have actually vendors. It's a thing like that. Everything is made by us because of necessity. So that's the question that you had asked. Thank you.
The simplicity premium, I think, Leon, it brings me to you. Leon, I know your firm and the work that you're doing in collaboration with GenWorks with respect to cancer diagnosis. And I think the headline of that would be do it very simply. So could you, and you know, see, I think there is a rapid, let's say, awareness that is getting built in India around cancer in general, but especially about cervical cancer. We have this WHO mission or a path that they had created or you know, kind of popularized recently, which is about eliminating or largely diminishing cervical cancer till by 2030. So could you throw some light on the kind of work that your firm is doing and how does it fit in this, you know, the fight against cervical cancer?
Yeah, so simplicity in medicine is very, very important. And there's two ways to look at it. One is the technology. It can be simple, but it has to be accurate. That's number one. When you design simple technology, it has to be accurate. But you always have to think, who is the user of your technology? And Arvind touched on it, and a few other members touched on this other point, that point of care is a very, very important place in the world of healthcare in India. Point of care, number one. And another thing that is very, very important, and I think that will make the healthcare, give a healthcare solution in India to become sustainable, is to have the primary care physicians more involved. Because the primary care physician is the actual point of care. So when we designed a product, we not only design a product which is simple, we've designed a system. We do not just sell a product, we sell a system. It doesn't make any sense to diagnose a patient if you cannot treat them. Never diagnose a patient if you cannot treat them, because it doesn't make sense. From an economic standpoint, from a point of the mental anxiety of a patient, it's just not necessary. So we have designed three things, and that is the three basic things for cervical cancer. One, the ability to do a point of care HPV test and get the result in 10 minutes. Second, for a positive patient to do a colposcopy exam and, if necessary, to treat that patient at point of care, and what we call in a single sitting. That means we can treat a cervical cancer patient, 85% of all cervical cancer patients we can treat in 45 minutes. And this is the game changer. Anyone who has precancerous lesion, we can treat it. In the developed world, sometimes physicians don't treat precancerous lesions because maybe it'll disappear. If it's CIN1, it might disappear over time because it's HPV. The reason why they don't do it in the developed world is because a patient is coming back to the physician on a yearly basis. That woman will come every single year and she'll make it a point to see her gynecologist. In the developing world, this doesn't happen. There are two main problems why women are dying from cervical cancer, and I will give you every 2 minutes a woman dies from cervical cancer somewhere in the world. And the reason is there's two main reasons. One is accessibility, and one is loss to follow-up. And we overcome both those issues because, as I said to you, as Arvind said to you, and Karkinos does, point of care is where we need to be for these type of things. The screening, the basic treatment needs to be done at point of care. And that overcomes the necessity of having a specialist, an oncologist, because not every woman can get to an OBGYN oncologist. Not every woman needs to get to an OBGYN oncologist if we can treat it at point of care. So we overcome the two main problems. One is the loss to follow-up, which is above, the meta-analysis says it's more than 60%. When a woman travels 30 kilometers to do a pap test, she spends 8 hours waiting for the pap test to take place. It takes place, it's a 5-minute test. It's then sent on to a lab, which is 3 to 4 weeks later. They call her back and they say, ma'am, you're positive. She's not coming back. One, she's not coming back because she could be the breadwinner of the family. Two, it's a huge undertaking to go back again. So 60% of the women are not coming back. We have a solution where we do the HPV test at point of care. It's an antigen test. They get a result in 10 minutes. Everyone who's positive moves on to colposcopy, visual inspection, and if there is a precancerous lesion, we treat it with thermocoagulation at point of care. So this whole process is 35 minutes. That process prevents the recurrence of cervical cancer for 6 years. So this is how we will solve it. Anyone who has CIN3+, which is a high-grade cervical cancer, needs to be escalated to a hospital. So to summarize the answer, sustainability in the Indian market, in the Indian healthcare market, we need to build up the primary care physicians, give them more tools to be proactive in the market, and reduce the necessity for a patient to be seen only by a specialist.
Arvind, if you could extend what you were explaining about from a patient's point of view, and your system fundamentally works on a collaborative system. So a few stakeholders, you would bring them together or help them work seamlessly together. Could you briefly throw light on, over time, which are the kind of players that you would have to bring into this collaboration for the treatment experience to get good or better than what it is for a patient?
Again, I'm going to span across the 4 Ds. So when it comes to detection, like what was mentioned earlier, pair with anybody who is able to have the reach of enabling with detection. So it could be the ASHA workers, it could be the women's self-help groups, it could be corporate wellness centers which are running programs in their own organization. Everything is not a CSR, everything, please, this is not not the mindset of everything is charity and all that. And the moment we start talking of camps, we are only talking of going somewhere in an underpowered area. No. It is about every citizen is affected or has the potential of being affected by this. So reaching out to all those groups with whom you can make an impact of getting through these detections, getting through these very, if I may say so, evidence-based medicine empowered risk assessment. That means that asking a set of questions that matter to that personalized individual. It's not a generic questionnaire that anybody can answer. It's about you. Sorry. It's about you and what can happen there. So going through that aspect of it. From there, based on the risk level, getting to a level of diagnosis where you start figuring out what sort of testing needs to be done and calibrate them at what level of clinical complexity or not. Very early stages, very good. Just have certain clinical discussions, keep them well and knock them off. Then comes the whole aspect of delivery of the healthcare. The delivery of the healthcare is where you start getting into a higher level of complexity. You don't have that many cancer hospitals. So how do you now start partnering with hospitals where we can enable cancer treatment? So you're not an oncology hospital, you need to have chemotherapy done. How can I work with the general physician, the general surgeon, and then through a method of technology powered telehealth, virtual tumor boards and all of them, start figuring out how to provide this care rather than ship this patient from one location to all over to another location. And when I say one location or other location, again, don't have a mental picture of a village to a big city and all that. Bangalore to Bangalore. Get the patient closer to where they are. If we can get the care without compromising clinical quality and safety. So that's not for discussion at all. So when we say get the patient somewhere, it's not at a diminished facility, it is at a facility at par. Then after that comes the whole aspect of managing the regime of care. See, this is one time, but then unfortunately, like what we heard with nephrology, this thing, if they've got to go through 150 times a dialysis in a year, that's a regime of care that needs to be managed. That means you need to manage the people, you need to manage the family members who are their caregivers, you need to manage that ecosystem, all of that put together. And constantly at various levels of people now, and the care providers and the ecosystem, having that learning management system to keep on empowering them with that relevant bit of knowledge. Learning management system is not condemning somebody to a training class because their appraisals were not good. That's not how you look at learning. Learning is about passing that essential information at point of care, because we are already burdened with an ecosystem, and getting them off into a training class is not practical. So how do you get that to them? Managing this so that the patient does not drop off, because they can get depressed, they can get cheesed off, they can get irritated, all of this, keeping that level of affiliation to the patient. And all of this targeting with good high grade evidence based clinical practices, powered and enabled through digital as a fabric. Bringing this all together and now making treatments and options around oncology treatment more realistic, affordable, practical and outcome based.
The other question that has always been on my mind is, how do you climb the, let's say, the credibility hill? You are the new player on the block, not in diagnosis or something, light-hearted like that. You are providing radiotherapy treatment to patients. Your machines are getting used by that. So, it's a high-stakes game. How have you been able to operate up till now, and what's the journey ahead of you in terms of being at level with the most established radiotherapy machinery providers?
Majority of the devices of this kind do not have clinical trial, but they are evaluated against set protocols and set standards. So what the credibility was a very important item. People many a times don't believe that you can make a LINAC from a country like this or a facility like this. So we had to go and get validation from several other agencies. So FDA 510K is considered a gold standard in this evaluation. So the first thing that we did is to go and get FDA approval. So once we have now got FDA approval, then several people across the globe, we are in touch with several oncologists across the globe. All of them actually have interest, or they would spend some time to understand what we do and how our machine works. But prior to FDA, this was just prior to COVID, we have cleared CE as well, and we have cleared several other particular regulatory requirements for about 119 countries that we have cleared as of today, including Russian speaking countries and all of that. So we have reached to a level where Each of these have to be addressed, and then we have developed the skill sets in-house on how we'll be able to understand the requirements for each of these standards. There are about 17 different standards that we have to show compliance to, or show that we perform better than that. So each of these IEC standards had to be thoroughly understood and evaluated against the product that we have made. And that actually is a long cycle time. Typically it took us to clear CE, it took us 1.5 years, took us another 6 months for majority of the other local country standards, and took us another 1 year more for getting through US FDA. But having crossed this 119 countries, now there is enough acceptance outside of India for our product. So that's how we've been able to build the credibility. Also, when we came to this LINAC, we are also an established radiotherapy manufacturer as such. So we have gone through several product audits for our previous generation products, and they have also regulatory approval in about approximately 70 countries. And then we've been able to reach that level by understanding from the initial stage that these are the protocols against which we have to surpass, or we have to at least meet and then reach there. So right now we have more acceptability outside of India than what we have inside India.
You have a product that could, shift the sands under this cervical cancer issue. Linking it to the market opportunity or the business that can be built around it, could you throw some light on what's your understanding of the opportunity that you have for this line of business in India? Where are you, and what are the possibilities from a market and the market opportunity point of view?
So let me start off with giving my thoughts on just the Indian market, not in the cancer market. So I firmly believe that India is the market to be in. As China gets weaker, India gets stronger, and we can see that it's happening right in front of our eyes. And when you look at the Indian market, first of all, there is it's not only is the vastness of the market, but there is a middle class in India today which is greater than the whole population of the United States. So this is something that we cannot ignore. And then you also have a very, very educated sector of the population. You just have to travel around Bangalore and you'll see Microsoft, you'll see all those there. They're all here. And this is a huge advantage of the Indian market. And that's why I'm a huge proponent of doing business in India. And not only that, I think people should start to look for capital from the Indian market. It used to come from China, it's not coming. The United States is going in towards a recession. I think the Indian market is a fabulous place to look at. To answer your question, WHO has thrown cervical cancer into the limelight. They said, they informed all the countries that you need to have a solution for cervical cancer. And they firmly believe, and I believe with them, that they can eradicate cervical cancer by 2030. And this is one of the greatest catalyzers for our company. Besides the fact that there is a lot of pressure on governments to find a solution to cervical cancer, because cervical cancer is so easy to treat and so cheap to treat if you catch it early. And it takes a long time to propagate. It takes a long time to grow. It's not like a brain tumor. It's like a pancreatic tumor. It takes years and years. And that's the reason why the WHO believe that they can eradicate cervical cancer by 2030. And we can do that. We can make an impact. And exactly what I said earlier, if we move our efforts to primary care, we create technology that primary care can use and implement, and not rely on the specialties, because specialties should only deal with specialty issues. A woman who's precancerous should be treated at point of care. A woman who's cancerous should be treated at the oncology level. And there should be access to women who to get to the oncology level. Because if the oncologist is full with women that are precancerous, that woman who is cancerous may wait 3, 4, 5, 6 months, a year to get to that oncologist. So I think we need to really look at the specialization of oncologists, OBGYN oncologists, specifically for cancer. Anything else out of that, we will not make an impact if we rely on specialists. It's just impossible. The numbers are against us. There's X amount of oncologists, and we got to screen tens of millions of women, and we got to treat tens of millions of women. So I think, and I come back to the same point, I think the healthcare situation in India is unsustainable unless they really bring forward the point of care, the accessibility, and the primary care to make that sector a much stronger sector. It'll make a huge impact. So I think simplicity, accessibility, and the ability to be able to screen and treat in a single sitting will make the huge impact.